Oh, 100% it proves it's a cover-up, because when you have the kind of evidence like there was with my son having to have emergency rectal repair surgery at 1, there were no underlying conditions. He was in and out of hospitals for 2 weeks straight.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
My pleasure. Honest to God. Amanda reached out to me from the Missing Justice group, and she said he's just not getting enough coverage, and can you please help with that? And I was all over it because, for one, that's a group that is just amazing. So I really appreciate them, and I was more than happy to help her out. When I read your story and heard the podcast, I had to do this. Please tell me, am I saying your name right? Is it Kara or Cara? How do I say it?
It is Kara. And Amanda and Amber have just been amazing. They've been helping me with my protests coming up. They've been spreading the word about the petition. They were the ones that were like, hey, you should start posting in true crime groups, which I never even thought of doing before, because I always felt like this was just a family custody thing, and that it wouldn't really match true crime. But when you really get into the nitty-gritty details of what has occurred and what has happened, it's most definitely a true crime story. I mean, it's almost something like you would watch on a 2020 newscast, with how many moving parts there are and how detailed and complex, this case truly is.
I agree. Absolutely. It belongs here. I'm so glad that they led you in this direction, because the word's going to get out. And I'm smaller than most of all of my favorite YouTubers that I follow and associate with. So once they get wind of this and they start sharing, Carol, we're going to get somewhere. We're going to get those numbers up on that petition. That is my goal. We want this case reopened for you.
Well,
so you have support here.
I actually have some updated information that nobody has actually heard before. This wasn't on Stuff for the Little Children. This wasn't on any of my normal broadcasts that I do, because I just found this out today. So this is being shared exclusively on your show.
Wonderful. Good for you.
It's not necessarily good. It's actually very aggravating. Back in August, as I spoke about in other broadcasts, and that they'll learn when you play the broadcast you're going to today that I did on the radio show, I talked about the incarcerated rectum of my son, and that the child protection expert had concerns of penetrative sexual abuse that was anally penetrated to my son. I learned today, after speaking to one of the ASAs, which is an assistant state's attorney at the Rolling Meadows Police Department, that they were never even given that case by the Palatine Police Department. The Palatine Police Department never forwarded the aggravated sexual assault case to be reviewed by their office. The Palatine Police never forwarded the death investigation of my son to be reviewed by their office.
Wow.
Yeah.
So definitely a cover-up is what that proves.
Oh, 100% it proves it's a cover-up, because when you have the kind of evidence like there was with my son having to have emergency rectal repair surgery at 1, there were no underlying conditions. He was in and out of hospitals for 2 weeks straight. And the fact that it was a sexual assault investigation, and then you even have a child protection expert, MD, stating, who is specialized in trauma, that they're considering anal penetrative sexual abuse, that should have went to the state's attorney. especially given my daughter's disclosure of the toothbrush incident between that happened. And so was I. And she contacted the GAL right away, and DCFS was involved. So how does that not go to the prosecutor's office? Why was that buried, and why was that swept under the rug?
Yeah, those are good questions that they need to be trying to answer, because just from listening, I was automatic with like, and I'm not quick to judge, but I will. Once I feel what I feel, I will put it out there. And I felt like Dad, Grandpa, maybe even Grandma, he shouldn't have been in that house, period. They failed him in so many ways. You are so right, Jennifer. They really did. Palatine did absolutely nothing. Yes, Hellraiser, that's right.
Not only should he have not have been in the house, the fact that I was still court-ordered visitation and wasn't receiving it also doesn't make any sense.
No.
And the police department was allowing that to happen because I specifically told them, I go, look, I contacted DCFS. I contacted Elgin DCFS. I contacted Deerfield DCFS. Nobody says I'm under investigation. Nobody says that they're looking into me for anything. And legally, they have to tell you if you're under investigation with DCFS. There was no safety plan. There was no nothing that I ever signed. So I should have been given my court-ordered visitation, and that was taken away without a court hearing, without a court date, without an order by a judge. They were just not giving me visitation, which is why I went to the Palatine Police Department and tried reporting, my children missing. Because nobody was telling me where they were. Nobody was telling me what was going on. And now receiving these medical records, because I have my medical rights back, I'm seeing that most likely they didn't want me around my son because he had to have emergency rectal repair surgery. So obviously there would have been bandages, scarring, and I would have been asking questions. And I don't think that's something they wanted.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. That absolutely. Now, is this when you were at work and they showed up at the house and just demanded the kids basically randomly? No,
that happened May 15th.
Okay.
What I'm talking about happened in August. And in May 15th, they decided the court supervisor, which was my best friend and the babysitter I hired for my children, was to be the court supervisor. She wasn't even there when they decided that. She never even said she could do it. They just court ordered her to do it without her being there, without me being there, without talking to me, without talking to her. It was crazy because if she didn't do it, then she would have been in contempt of court. And she never even said she could do this. I mean, what if she had a job? What if she had something going on? She's going to be violating court orders on something she can't do. It was ridiculous. And then this court-ordered supervisor is willing to do it, is doing it, and is saying there's bruising, there's disclosures of sexual abuse, there's disclosures of physical abuse, there's all these problems. She's contacting DCFS, given her concerns, because the GAL was straight up ignoring her. And then the whole, the whole anal penetrative abuse comes up, which that's a doctor. The doctor is telling you she's considering anal penetrative sexual abuse on a 1-year-old. For them to put that in a report is huge because doctors don't want to be sued. They hardly ever want to say there's abuse unless they're 100% positive or at least 99.9% sure.
Right. You're right. I mean, but did it really take a rocket scientist to figure out that this little baby has all this anal tearing or just... How else could it happen? I mean, I know I heard they can push, too hard when they try to go to the bathroom and all that. But my first thought was sexual abuse.
Well, I mean, even if he was pushing too hard, you wouldn't have absolutely no anal tone. Right. The fact there's no anal tone, and even when they put the rectum back, that it kept popping out, proves there's an injury. And I was looking up all of this. I looked up all the signs of anal penetrative abuse on a child. There would be a pulsating rectum, which there was, which they talked about in the medical records. There would be intense swelling, and the swelling occurs 6 days after the incident. Well, when the rectum swelled to the size of an orange was about a week after the initial hospitalization, which the initial hospitalization was the second. So that's about, between 7 to like about 2 weeks. So about a week to 2 weeks, which is when the swelling becomes even more intense. So as time goes on and the problem's not fixed, the swelling's just going to get worse. And the color even changed. It went from pink to purple to like a grayish purple color. So that also tells you that there was some sort of, in my opinion, bruising, because why would it be purple?
Right.
It's not the average color of a rectum. They said it was a purple donut-like mass. And that was on August 9th. So August 9th, it was a purple-like donut mass. And that's when the specialist was saying anal penetrative sexual abuse. Then you have August 13th. So that's 4 days later. Now the rectum is a size of an orange, cannot even be put back in with a surgical procedure. My son is said to be in critical condition because it was high-risk mortality, high-risk morbidity, and high risk of complications. They were afraid to even transfer him without him dying.
Wow.
They did transfer him. They did do the emergency surgery, and he was still seeing a specialist after that because he kept prolapsing, even after the rectal repair surgery. Wow. So after reading those records, after viewing this evidence, I 100% believe now that this is why everything occurred the way it did with my son's death, because they already knew my son was dying. So they already had those medical records. They already had that evidence, and they didn't even take it to the state's attorney. So it would have been in Palatine Police's best interest to do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Conflict of interest, period. They covered their asses, and I don't see how. That's a great question. Who just asked me that? I'm sorry. Oh, Jennifer Marie. How could they have explained that? I don't think they did. They just swept it under the rug.
Yeah, they never explained it. They never said what caused it, because they tested him for cystic fibrosis, which would have been a cause. He did not have cystic fibrosis. They tested him for any kind of tumor, any kind of cancers. Didn't have that. They even did like a sigmoidography or something like that. It's where you basically look in the anal canal to see if there's any sort of abrasions or polyps due to straining or constipation. He didn't have any polyps. So obviously he wasn't straining or constipated to have a rectum come out.
No, in my mind, the only way that can happen is some like extreme anal penetration. I'm sorry, I don't want to just say it like that, but what else? What else can make your entire rectum come? That's just crazy.
Especially on someone as young as my son. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
It sounds like not only did they do it, but even though he was healing and everything, somebody kept messing with him, so it couldn't get better. Is what it seems like to me.
I don't know if they were messing with him. I think, well, here's what happened. So the first hospital ended up releasing my son when they were not supposed to. My son was supposed to stay overnight, actually. They even had the breakfast on the board, and I'm a CNA, so I understand how all this works. They put the meal chart on the board. They put everything on the board for the next day. And I even asked the nurse, I go, is my son staying again? So this would have been like the 4th day that he would have stayed, which that in itself is ridiculous and doesn't make any sense. You don't stay that long for a normal prolapse. Typically, you put on a glove, you insert the rectum back in place, and it should stay. But the problem was it was not staying. It just kept popping out no matter what was being done. So anyways, so when I had asked the nurse, she was telling me it kept popping out and he would have to stay. This was at St. Alexius Hospital in Hoffman Estates. When DCFS was called by my boss, because nobody was doing anything, and it didn't seem like this was being reported, and my boss was very upset about this. I told her to leave it alone because DCFS wasn't doing anything anyways. She called. All of a sudden, my son's being emergency released from the hospital. They hadn't even figured out what was causing the prolapse, and they just taught my ex, who was literally under investigation for child pornography at the time, to put his rectum back in place. So I don't know if they were still messing with him and continuously sexually assaulting him, I don't think that's likely. What I think is likely is they had no idea what they were doing. My son was crying and screaming. The swelling was so bad, they had no medication control. Jesus. So it just kept getting worse because they didn't know what they were doing. And he should have never been released from the hospital.
And that makes total sense. That makes sense. And I pray to God that that's what was happening, because to think that somebody would be doing this to this baby when he's already got issues. But then there is the toothbrush incident. So somebody at some point was messing with him, right? Was that before or after the point we're at now?
That was before. The toothbrush incident was told to me and the court supervisor. I believe that was the 6th of August. So that was actually after he was released from the hospital on an emergency note. Because my ex literally was like, hey, do you want visitation with the kids, right after they got him out of the hospital the next day? And I was like, yeah, of course I want visitation with the kids. And when he brought the kids to me, he dropped them off at the library. I picked them up with my court supervisor. My son, I was changing my son. My daughter came up to me. She started holding his hand, which I thought was really weird. She never, ever would hold his hands when I changed him. So I was changing him, and like his anus was huge. It was literally pulsing. And I was like, okay, this is very bizarre. I mean, it was huge. It was the size. It was more of a size than a quarter.
Jesus.
It was huge. It was shocking to see that. I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. So then my daughter's like, I have to go to the bathroom, and she's tugging on my shirt and everything. So we go to the bathroom. We leave the door open a crack because the court supervisor has to supervise me doing everything according to the judge and the GAL. And my daughter's in the bathroom, and she goes, someone hurt James. And I'm like, what do you mean someone hurt James? And she goes, someone put a toothbrush, or she goes, I'm sorry. She said, Grandpa put a toothbrush in James' butt. Then she said she tried to carry him off the bed, but Grandpa pushed her down. Right. And I mean, the way she said this was so flat. There was no emotion. And then she just like smiled and started laughing and like playing like nothing was just said. Like she did not just say these most heinous things to me.
You said she just, all of a sudden she just went, smile. And that threw me off. Like somebody's been coaching her or something. Wasn't that weird for you?
That did not happen around me. That happened with the court supervisor. The court supervisor actually wrote that down in her letter to the GAL because she had written basically a synopsis of everything that had been happening. And I mean, my daughter was even showing signs before the court case even started. I actually had to call a child psychologist because she was making disclosures before the court case even started.
We just Grandpa, right?
Against Grandpa. And at first we were like, is it my grandpa? Because, I mean, she was around multiple grandpas. So we didn't know who she was talking about. And, it became very clear who she was talking about because she would say specific things, and it would be after she would go to his house. But yeah, and we had talked to Tom, and we're like, can you talk to your father about this? Because his father had a very abusive history. I mean, his father was extremely abusive to himself and his brother. And Tom had said he was sadistic. He had broken his brother's collarbone. I mean, he was just a very evil man to them while they were growing up.
Jerry, right? Jerry Biel, is that dad's name?
Yeah, Jerry Biel. So I always had concerns about her being around this man, especially alone, but he had a wife by the name of Helena Biel, and Helena Biel showed nothing but compassion and love and kindness to Sasha. So basically I was comfortable with her, being there before the custody case started, because Helena was there, and I didn't think Helena would ever let anything happen to Sasha.
Right.
But even Helena,
since we're on that.
Yeah, I definitely trust her. I don't think she had anything to do with it. In fact, they left her with his body. The night that he passed away, they left him. And there is no doubt in my mind that they both fled the scene because it was Halloween night, and Jerry had always taken off Halloween night to be with the kids. So I don't think Jerry was working. It says he was working. I doubt that.
Yeah. They said it like Grandpa was the only one there. Grandma was in the shower, and Grandpa left about 20 minutes or so after or before grandma came out of the shower and found him on the bed. Is that right?
Yes, that is their story. That doesn't make any sense to me, especially with how sick my son had been.
Mm-hmm.
To leave someone who was literally dying in August on a bed by himself. Who is that young?
Period. Sick or not, my baby was never left alone on the bed because of the fall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, I received an anonymous message from an individual because there was somebody basically trying to persuade this individual that my just fell off a bed. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense, because they would have just said that in the beginning. Not only would they have said that, there would have been bruising where the cervical spinal cord injury was. There would have been, other bruising if a child had fallen that high from a bed.
Right.
It wouldn't have, it just didn't make any sense to me. And not only that, but the egregiousness of this message was that my daughter did it. That my daughter was trying to carry my son off the bed and that he fell down.
And did all that damage? Come on.
Exactly. That's when I'm like, that's ridiculous. What, she causes prolapse rectum too? Like, get out of here.
Right. And everything else that's going to come out. Oh, my God.
Yeah, and someone clearly is trying to protect the GAL as well as the police department, because the same individual has been writing reviews for the GAL saying that she's such a good person and that she does her job right and she's a professional. I'm sorry, if the GAL was a good person, she wouldn't have said that I was going to murder my children with no evidence.
I don't like her. I don't know her, but I don't like her from the story. As a GAL, she did not protect your rights. She did not have your back. And that's what they're supposed to do. Can you talk a little bit more about her?
Oh, yeah, sure. So from the start, it was obvious this woman didn't like me. I paid her $750. That was to start the case. That was all I was ever court ordered to pay. So I had no idea how much money this woman would rack up. I didn't know of her credentials or anything because she was court ordered, but she always had an attitude with me. She always seemed biased. She would talk about me very nasty. Like, she would call me a petulant child. She would constantly have this air of arrogance about her. The first time she ever came to my home was beautiful. This 3-bedroom home, very clean, very neat, very tidy. She came and she was very surprised that my home was so clean. She's like, how can you work and have a clean home and 2 kids? She was hoping to find something, it seemed like, that wasn't good. So she took my daughter in a corner and she did this right in front of me, and she gave my daughter a stuffed pony. And it was a stuffed My Little Pony. And my daughter looks right at her and she goes, I love my mommy. And she goes, I know you do. And then she just looked down at the floor. It sounded like she was trying to ask something about Grandpa, about Jerry, and I could not hear the rest of the conversation. But then she just left. So after she just left, I didn't hear anything from her. My boss told me that she spoke with her, and my boss told her, multiple things that Tom had told her personally throughout, my working relationship with my boss, because Tom would disclose a lot of things to my boss. He felt close to my boss. My boss was a very motherly figure to me and my ex, actually. So she said everything she knew. The court supervisor, who was friends with both of us, mutual friends, he disclosed a lot to her too. She told the GAL everything she knew. And the GAL ignored everyone. I mean, she ignored every single person who said Tom was abusive. She ignores every single person that said Tom had a drug problem. She didn't write any of it in her report. All she did was trash me. Her whole report was just trashing me. And she could not, 3 medical professionals, psychologist, psychiatrist, and another psychologist who was a domestic violence expert, stated there was nothing wrong with me. I had PTSD from, previous trauma, that I would never hurt my kids, that I was not a danger to my children. And that wasn't good enough for her. She just said, I disagree, in her report. So the professionals with the credentials and the degrees are telling you there's nothing wrong with me. And you're still sitting there saying I shouldn't have my kids for no reason.
I don't get that. And then later she took herself off. Do I remember that correctly?
Oh, it gets better than that. Not only did she take herself off, she did an emergency motion to be removed from the case 6 days before my son passed. So in my opinion, she knew what was going to happen.
Wow.
She knew my son was critically ill, and she knew he was going to pass, and she did not want to be on that case when he did.
Right.
And, I hope someone is looking into her, because her
into her, yes, that's what we do around here. It doesn't stop with just sharing your story. We dig all into the backgrounds, and we find out who these culprits are, who they were. So, yeah, she's going to be out there.
And
what is her name?
Her name is Julie Pirtle, and Julie Pirtle was caught lying multiple times in court, which, because she is an attorney, that would be considered misrepresentation of the evidence. She stated that 8 mandated reporters had contacted DCFS in regards to both of my children. Mandated reporters are not just regular people. Mandated reporters are professionals such as nurses. They could be doctors. They could be pediatricians. They could be teachers. They are individuals who are trained to contact DCFS if they feel there is abuse. 8 mandated reporters were ignored, supposedly, because she said in court that the DCFS investigation had been dropped. A DCFS investigation takes 2 weeks. That is the legal amount of time that is needed for a DCFS investigation. It could not have been dropped because it had only been a week.
Right.
And
that's the minimum.
At minimum, exactly. And this was when my son was having the incarcerated rectum. This was when my son was in critical condition, that she made these statements. This was August 14th, and everything had happened August 13th. And then it went into August 14th at like 2 a.m. was when he had the emergency rectal repair surgery. 2 a.m. in the morning. And she's coming into court saying DCFS dropped the investigation. And then I dug into her background and I dug into her cases. And it actually turned out that she was the guardian litem for a DCFS case with the same judge.
Wow.
So it was her. Oh, it gets better. It was her, Julie Pirtle, as the guardian litem, Scott Sheen, who was the attorney, and Scott Sheen is the attorney for my ex right now. Judge Dalton, who was the judge on my case, and Joe McMahon was the state's attorney on the case, and Joe McMahon was the one who did not prosecute the child porn as well as my sex assaults. So they already had worked together on a case 2 years ago. And Scott Sheen said in court, again, that's my ex's attorney, that they had never been on a case together. So he as well committed material misrepresentation because they all had been on a case together. And so why would you blatantly lie in court just about being in a case with someone?
Exactly. And anybody that follows me knows that how I feel. If you tell one lie, you've told others. There's a reason that you start to lie, because the truth doesn't need any help, period.
Exactly. And I feel like they just didn't know what to do at this point, because after that incident in August 14th, that was when they were pushing so hard for me to sign paperwork saying that I needed to be represented by, that I needed to be supervised by a government official just to see my kids and pay money for it. My thinking is the reason they did this were 2 things. One, they had no evidence that I was ever a danger to my children. So they could not legally take my kids. And they already knew that they could not legally take my kids. They had no evidence that I was a danger to my children. So if I sign that paperwork, there's your evidence, because I'm stating myself. Right. I'm a danger to my children because I require government supervision. Right. The second reason why I think they were doing that was they wanted to potentially frame me for what was going to happen to my son. I highly believe that. And the reason why I believe that is because why would the GAL go out of her way to sit there and try to convince someone I'd murder my kids?
Especially when they're there to look out for you and your kid and protect. So what I understand about the guardian the GAL, is they're put over to basically watch someone who can't take care of him or herself. So that was supposed to be for James, not for you, right?
It was supposed to be for James, and it was supposed to be for Sasha. The reason they put a GAL on a case is when there is an allegation of abuse, whether it be physical or sexual, the GAL is basically a detective, even though they have only 2 days of training, or if it might be less. Some states it's only half a day, requiring like child protection, everything. It's a half a day of training to 2 days of training. They are put in place to investigate if there is abuse. So when there is a GAL involved, everybody will listen to the GAL. The police department will listen to the GAL. The DCFS agency will listen to the GAL, because the GAL is the one who is supposed to be determining if there is abuse or if there's not abuse. So if you have a corrupt GAL on a case, you might as well forget about ever receiving any kind of justice. Because if that GAL is against you, right, and there's corruption, and they've already determined that they don't want to help you or your children, and they are purely biased for one party, you're just not going to get anywhere. Because DCFS will go off the opinion of the GAL.
Right. But it's not supposed to be a biased, jacked up opinion based on personal feelings.
No. And I mean, there was a professional that even questioned me at one point. She was just like, are Tom and her having an affair? I was like, why would you think that? She's just like, because the way this woman acts, I mean, she hates you for no reason. She's totally against you. I mean, she's telling me that you're going to murder your kids and has no evidence.
Right.
And the fact that she's acting like some sort of jealous girlfriend.
I wouldn't put it past them. Plus, like you said, she was in cahoots with the whole circle. So it could have been about money. It could have been about loyalty. It could have been a favor she had to pay back. You know how that stuff goes in the politics.
I don't know what it is, but if Tom is ever charged for the death of my son, and I hope that happens because he was the last person to see my son alive. There was nothing ever mentioned about any sort of incident that caused the cervical spinal cord injury to happen. The police report just says he was laying on a bed and then he was dead, which makes absolutely no sense. None. There was never any reason for the prolapsed rectum. His reasoning was, he took a really large poop and that's how it happened. That was literally his reasoning. He even said there was no history of constipation. It was one large poop and that caused everything. But if Tom is ever charged, I hope that woman goes down with him.
Absolutely.
Because it's 100% the reason why he was believed, right, and why everybody was looking the other way. Because if she was not there and she was not backing him up and she was not telling his story and the way he saw things, nobody would have believed him. He has no degree. He has no college degree. He lived with his parents. And he had no job. This is not a man who had any credibility.
Wow.
She was the reason that he had credibility. And now she's gone. And even when she's gone, they are still trying to use her report and submit her report as evidence in the criminal cases that have gone on since she's been gone, which is illegal and unethical. And they can't do that because the report that she made was impounded. Not only was it impounded, she was removed as a GAL from Kane County.
Wow. As well as the judge being, did he recuse himself and then he got demoted
Yeah. Judge Dalton recused himself October 10th, which again is very suspicious. You recused yourself 3 weeks before my son passed. So he recused himself October 10th. And then I believe it was January of that same year that he was demoted to an evictions judge. And then Judge Cruz was going off of every single one of his orders, would not listen to me, was ignoring the fact my son passed, was ignoring the fact that there was evidence of child pornography, was ignoring the text messages and Facebook messages of this man literally admitting to assaulting me. Not only was he admitting to assaulting me, he was admitting that he almost beat a child to death. He was admitting that he had no ethics. that he had narcissistic personality disorder and that he had multiple personality disorder and that he experienced blackouts and dissociative fugues. So this is not a person who should be around any child.
Period.
Including his own.
Period.
This is a person who's severely sick and needs to be medicated. And he was supposed to have a psych eval. I had a psych eval. I submitted my psych eval. My psych eval said that I had been abused as a child and then I have PTSD. That is what my psych eval stated. Supposedly he submitted a psych eval. The only person who ever saw his psych eval was Julie Pirtle. His own lawyer even admitted he never saw his psych eval. Wow. And the supposed psychiatrist he saw was Bernardino from Applied Science Psychiatry.
What?
That's not even a legitimate psychiatrist.
It sounds so generic.
It's a very generic. Applied Science Psychiatry. There's no applied science to psychiatry. I would like to see that individual's credentials, his degree. More importantly, we've tried to subpoena his psych eval. His psych eval should be in the records of the GAL. It wasn't. So I don't think he ever had a psych eval. So you have a dangerous predator, in my opinion, who didn't have a psych eval, who is then given custody of children. What the heck did you think was going to happen?
Exactly. Not to mention what we haven't really touched on yet, the hard drive or the flash drive that you found with that stuff on it. This man should have been near no kids, no schools, no daycares. I mean,
that. If you want to touch on the hard drive, I can give you the exact data for it for the listener.
Go for it. Okay. Absolutely.
So the hard drive had 47 identified prepubescent children by the National Center for Missing Exploited Children. It had 422 children who were recognized by the National Center for Missing Exploited Children. And it had 280 unrecognized apparent prepubescent children, which weren't even recognized or identified by the National Center for Missing Exploited Children. These are children that even a national database that does this didn't even know about. Wow. So why in the world would anybody think it's a good idea for this man to have these kids? The fact that he had the hard drive, the fact he admitted it was solely his property, and the fact that he stated that a friend borrowed it. Okay, so you have multiple friends borrowing a hard drive with child pornography. You know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like a ring.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm sorry, why was this swept under the rug? And then you have a state's attorney or assistant state's attorney stating the only reason they did not prosecute was because of a possession technicality. This man asked for a hard drive with child porn to be destroyed. I think it's obvious that he's guilty.
What?
You don't ask for evidence to be destroyed if you're not guilty. You would want to find out about those kids.
Yeah, they should have. Oh my God. When I heard that, I was like, wait a minute, what? And then did I hear you right earlier? They never passed that on to be investigated, right?
Well, they passed it on to the state's attorney's office. Okay. And right after my son died was when they decided they weren't going to charge it. I feel like the only reason they did not charge it was because, once again, it's a cover-up. Because if you charge that, they're going to really look into my son's death as a homicide, aren't they? You have a man charged with child porn who was in the possession of a toddler when this toddler passed away from unknown causes.
Exactly. And his grandfather, the baby's grandfather, who had his own investigation going on, he shouldn't have been in that house.
Yeah, no, he shouldn't have. And where the hard drive was found, the hard drive was found in a car that Tom and I both shared. So I paid for the car because I had the credit. Tom couldn't keep a job more than 3 months. So I paid for the car. I don't drive because of a medical condition. So Tom was the only one driving the car. When he was arrested for my sexual assault back in March was when they gave the car back to me because the car is legally mine. So the hard drive was found literally in a compartment, like a secret compartment in the trunk of the car where you would look under the spare tire area.
Wow.
And next to it was condoms.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. So the fact that it was in that kind of compartment and the fact that there were condoms next to it is even more concerning. But supposedly you didn't know what was on the drive, even though in addition to the children, the real children, you had over 47,000 images of animated crap that was depicting sex and children and adults and sex and children. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. That's totally your drive.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Like, that's ridiculous.
It's sick. And then you got condoms next to it. That if you found baggies and cocaine in the trunk, they would say that was intent to sell, probably. So how do I find this hard drive and condoms and not think this man is a predator out here?
Exactly. But like I said, my son had passed right when they were investigating that. And then the judges had ignored it too. So if you were to charge the child porn right after my son passed, every single thing would be looked at with a fine-tooth comb.
It should have been. That should have put it in overdrive. But sorry, go on. No, I was just agreeing with you that everything should have gone into overdrive at that point.
Yeah, but that's unfortunately not how our politicians work. Our politicians work where we need to do what is right for us, not what is right for the American people. And because so many people messed up on this, and so many people with a lot of money and a lot of power messed up on this, they tried to bury it, and I won't let it be buried. No, you won't. I tell you that. And if it weren't for you, it may just have been buried. As I look around and I don't see the media coverage that we should have seen, I don't hear the local department speaking out. They really wanted this to go away. Oh, in the worst possible way. I mean, I literally had a detective call me once from Palatine Police Department, and he's just like, when are you going to stop? No, like, never. Your child, would you stop? Well, some of them would, Carol. And we know some stories where the parents are giving up, day one. So it happens. They get scared or tired or whatever it is. But me personally, I would never stop. Ever. No. Just like when they sat there and tried to tell me, you may never know how my son died. Screw you. Yes, I will. Right. And I will do whatever it takes to find out exactly what happened. And now that I have all these pieces, and all these pieces are coming together, and the fact that my son was already critically ill in August, it cannot be a sudden unexplained death of a child. Because to be a sudden unexplained death of a child, you would have very, very minor symptoms, like a runny nose or a small cough. You would not have a child almost passing away from an incarcerated prolapse rectum. No. There was already all this evidence that he was sick. There was already all this evidence that he was severely ill. And none of that was brought up in the medical records when he passed away. That was very odd to me. Because if you read the medical records from when he passed away, it was like he had never been at the hospital. They didn't mention any history of surgeries. They didn't mention any history of the prolapse rectum. They mentioned nothing. They acted like a child just suddenly passed away. And then you see all of the medical history from Children's Lorries, from Northwest Community, and St. Alexius. And it's like, how was this missed? How was this not written about in the medical history the night he passed? They doctored it up because to admit to all of that would be admitting to a lot of other stuff, like the fact that they knew that this was progressively getting worse from August to October. It incriminates them, in my opinion, so they swept it under the rug with the rest of that. Well, they chose the wrong mother to mess with. Yes, they did. Yes. Let me clap for you right now, Kara. You are so strong, so brave, and humble. I've listened to both podcasts now, and I mean, the stories you tell, chat, let me let you guys know something. I've seen tears in this chat. I've had one person say they had to leave
and they wish you all the best, but they couldn't hear this. But I'm going to tell y'all, you really haven't even heard the whole story, right, Kara?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more that I don't even talk about. I stick to the main points.
Yeah.
I stick to the egregiousness of the neglect that went on, as well as the heinous harassment to myself.
Yes.
And the just basically being ignored is what I talk about the most. And then you can see that in the transcripts where I'm literally ignored.
Yeah, Amanda is going to send over the transcripts, or you can if you want, because I haven't actually seen those. But again, we go deep over here. We don't just tell your story and make a video. So there is already an entire playlist dedicated to James, and it will continue to grow. And I always share in every group. I even have my group, Just Justice, where I share videos that I put out, plus other creators. We're about spreading the awareness. So they messed with the wrong mama, and you've got support. We're going to make sure this story gets told over and over and over. And I want to read this to you. AP is in our chat. As a former pediatric trauma RN, the only time I saw a prolapsed rectum in a child was due to sexual abuse or an extremely rare birth defect. Heartbreaking. That's the first thing I thought.
Are you able to bring her on? Because I feel like she would be an excellent expert witness.
AP, absolutely. AP, are you?
Yeah. Not witness, but an expert. Sorry.
Absolutely. That's what we want. Anyone that we have sleuths that will go and dig up everything about the GAL, the judge. We're going to get to the root of this. We have to now. We have to. He deserves it. You deserve it. AP, are you in the chat? If you are, go ahead and just write me back, and we'll go from there. AP is usually always around, so absolutely. If we can't do it tonight, if she's gone or he, I'm not even sure if it's a he or she, but we will definitely get them on so that you can talk to them and get, oh, there we go. Children don't just die from natural causes. He probably died from a perforated bowel from the continued sexual abuse, leading to sepsis and sadly death, in my honest medical opinion. AP, would you like to come up on the stream? Kara would like to speak with you. I'm watching for your chat. We haven't even talked about, Kara, all of the horrible things that happened to you prior to what happened to James. So this story, I mean, when I say heartbreaking, it has every element, and I don't like it at all. What I do love, though, is that we have a strong, caring mother, because we've heard way too many of them that don't care, like Xavier Harrelson's mom. Some of them seem to be drugged out of their mind, like Candace Wells. Others are just young and maybe dumb, like Taylor Nicholson. We've got a lot of bad moms out there. And so to have one here who is putting the pedal to the metal and not giving up on her baby, you have my utmost respect. And I mean that sincerely.
Thank you so much. I mean, that means the world to me, because when I saw my son, the night he passed away, when I went to the hospital to meet with the doctor and everything, because I didn't even know he had passed at that point. I found out when I got there. There were red marks all over his stomach that almost looked like handprints, and I was honestly wondering if that was internal bleeding. So that is why I'm really interested in speaking with this RN, so she could give me like her honest opinion. And I'm so glad to have somebody who's willing to talk about this, because I've been looking for someone such as an expert to go over, these medical records with, because they just, I mean, to me, as even a CNA, they just don't even make any sense. Just the fact that this was so ignored. I mean, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and you do have that experience as a CNA. You've seen a lot. So yeah, I can understand that being frustrating, that even with your experience, to not be able to put this all together. AP said, sure, she would love to come up. So AP, let me do this. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and I want you to email me now, if you would, and I will send you the StreamYard link. Please and thank you. Okay, while that's going on, let me see what other points were sticking out to me. I think what bothers me so much is the fact that Dad had a record of the, pornography, children's pornography, if I remember correctly, and then Grandpa was being investigated for molesting your daughter, Kara. Is that right?
That's correct. She was making many disclosures. She was making disclosures to me, to my mother, to the court supervisor. Now she's even making disclosures to DCFS workers, a forensic interviewer, police officers. I mean, she's basically telling anyone who will listen, help me at this point. And still, she's being ignored and nobody's listening. But everyone is at least in agreement, finally, that she needs to see a specialist. That is trauma and sexual assault. That should have been done a year ago.
Absolutely.
But now it's finally being done. It seems like people are finally taking me seriously now. I think the fact that they weren't taking me seriously was due to the judge ripping custody from me, because everyone automatically assumes, oh, you don't have custody and you're the mother. Well, you just must be a drug addict or crazy or, hurt your children some horrible way. People automatically make those assumptions. That's why it's so great that NBC just did a segment where they showed that when there is allegations of abuse, that the child is given to the abusive parent because the protective parent is presumed to be coaching the child, which I find insane because false allegations of children only happen 5 to 10% of the time. And that's a statistic like anyone can look up. And it's been proven since the 1970s. So why are we accepting that? I mean, why is the court standard to not believe the child or the protective parent when the statistics prove that the child is not lying 90% of the time?
Because they didn't care about all that. They didn't want to know about the facts. They know. And for me, if my son says it happened, I'm investigating. I'm not going to doubt that right off the bat. I'm not going to doubt it at all until I get to the point where there's proof that, okay, it didn't happen. Now me and my son have to have a conversation. Let's find out where this came from and why you would say something like that. But you don't start out not believing them. If they say they've been touched in their bathing suit area, as I've heard you call it, you just don't stop there. I don't understand. And then, again, I'm not even an investigator or a detective, but when you explain the fact that Jerry was like not even in the picture until you guys or you gave birth to your daughter.
That was weird. I always found that odd. I mean, he literally, we never saw him. We saw him maybe twice before she was born. And I think one time was just like a family meeting or whatever. And then he was nonstop in the picture right after she was born. It was the strangest thing. It was no involvement and then way too much involvement, over involvement, over control. I did not like what I was seeing. I mean, I was literally working as hard as I was working so we could get out of his house. So we could then get out of the house he was renting to us, because even the house he was renting to us, he would just come in randomly because he had a key and he would try to control everything and constantly want to take Sasha over to his house. And I was like, no, this is not comfortable for me. So I moved us out to Elk Grove Village, which was further from Palatine. So we didn't have as much access. And Tom would still literally take her over there while I was at work. And then I even hired a babysitter. And I was paying $200 a month in addition to paying rent for us, in addition to paying the car payment, in addition to paying off medical bills. I mean, I was spending an insane amount of money just to keep this man away from my daughter because I had concerns. So the fact that the GAL put in her report, I never had concerns about this man before until the court battle started is a lie. It's a blatant lie. And there are many witnesses who can confirm that lie. The GAL even spoke with my therapist. So she's sitting here saying I had no concerns. But then she says, oh, but when I spoke with the therapist told me that Kara didn't like the fact that Jerry would sleep with her daughter in his boxers and that he would go around the house wearing just his boxers. Okay, lady, that means I was concerned about this man.
Yeah, that shit's not cool.
And didn't want him around my kid. I mean, can you make it any more obvious?
That is not cool. I would lose it. Like, even my children's father should not be walking around the house half naked. I mean, put on some shorts. What are you doing?
It was literally just like, I don't even think it was boxers. It was like those really tight underwear. It was gross. You could see the outline of you know what.
No way.
And that's what was considered appropriate. And I spoke with Tom about it multiple times. I was like, I don't like this. This does not make me feel comfortable. I do not want this man to do that. Even around just me, I don't like it. He goes,
right.
it's a Polish thing. I'm like, what?
I don't give a damn if it was a Scottish thing. You better put some damn clothes on in my house.
Oh, yeah.
Your house, too. If I'm in your house, like, they can't shut me up. And I get it. You know, his house, his rules, or whatever the case was, Kara. I'm not saying you should have done anything differently. I'm just saying I don't know how to act sometimes. So, yeah, I would have threw his ass a shirt like, yo, you know, it's not okay. And it's sick. Really, really, really sick. And then for them to let the baby live in this house, it just blows me away. Clearly, he was praying. Once you had a girl, here he comes.
He didn't want any involvement with my son. I mean, I kept my son away from him at all costs. I would not bring him over. I would take my son to work with me every single day to avoid him being taken there. And Jerry didn't even care. He never asked to see him. He never asked for him to come over. He never wanted alone time with my son. But yet you want consistent, constant alone time with my daughter. Why?
No way. No freaking way. Yeah, those are red flags. And you were young, too. So you were very smart because you saw all of this stuff. And I understand, again, you're in a position where you can only do so much about it. But as soon as you could, you did make moves. And I appreciate that. You didn't sit there and claim, you know, and I understand battered women's syndrome and all those things. You were there for a while, but I did hear you say in your podcast that, you know, hindsight, you should have just grabbed them and got the hell out of there. Well, hindsight is 20/20, but I'm glad that you realized that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I look back on everything and I'm like, oh my God, there were so many signs. I mean, the fact that this 26-year-old man wanted a 17-year-old girl and to be in a relationship with a 17-year-old girl, right, and to be in such a sexual, intimidating, scary relationship from the start.
Right.
Because basically the way it started was, you know, I was kind of like interested in like this BDSM dynamic because I had read about like the 50 Shades of Grey stuff. My step-grandmother had literally given me the books.
Oh, wow.
And when this man was like, oh yeah, you know, I've done a little bit of that. You know, I'm thinking some light hair pulling, you know, something not crazy, you know.
Right.
And yeah. And then when what he was doing and what he was showing me and just the type of stuff he was interested in, I mean, it was borderline abusive. In fact, I would say it did get to be abusive at times.
Absolutely. And then for him, knowing what he knew about his dad, knowing how you felt for I almost called him Jerry, Tom to take the baby over there anyway, it just makes him more of a suspect in my eyes. And knowing what he did to you, I mean, it just seems like it runs in the family. It's weird. One second, you guys. Yeah, it's just really, really weird. What kind of father? I mean, clearly he didn't have a lot of it. Oh, you lost me, Kyra? Okay. Just come back in. Okay, she'll be back, you guys. We got you back, Kyra.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Technology, it happens. Don't worry. If that happens, just pop back in and I'll let you right back up. But I was just talking about how Thomas knew the situation and how you felt, and he still would take your child over there. Something else that bothers me and that I heard you say was that when, I believe it was the judge, you'll have to correct me, please, if I'm wrong, but they allowed, oh, she doesn't see the link. Okay, I'll send it out again, AP. No worries. They allowed your daughter to go to that house, and the judge said, understanding that Jerry had the record or the investigation into his molestation, they allowed, I lost Kara again, but they said, trying to remember her words, that he could just go into another room when she was there. If I am remembering that right. Is that right, Kara? Did you hear that?
That is correct. And that was only because the lawyer actually spoke out, and he was like, well, Tom lives with his dad. And then the judge is just like, oh, well, he can just go into another room then. And I was like, my jaw hit the floor. I was like, are you kidding me?
Jesus. Yeah,
are you kidding me? Into another room? Like, that's not going to do anything. But then you can look into the history of this judge, and the First Ward actually did an article on him. I mean, he's ignored sexual abuse in the past. He's ignored blatant sexual abuse in the past. There was a parent who was literally masturbating with their child.
Oh my God. So it's possible that judge has a little history, or maybe he's included in the ring. It's not far-fetched. So during this interview, Kara was having some technical difficulties. So we lost her this second time for quite a while, maybe about a half hour. During that time, I had a conversation with one of my subscribers / I'm going to call her a friend and an expert. And she answered some of the questions that I had while we waited for Kara to come back on. Kara had asked if she would come up. She wanted to ask her some questions that she hadn't been able to ask anybody in that field. And it's interesting and it's graphic. I'm not sharing the portion of just AP and I in this video because this is more of a breakdown of Kara's time with me. But I will be uploading that one separately because there are a lot of good questions and answers that AP and I went through that I think Kara might find interesting, and then maybe some of you. But when Kara comes back in here shortly, just know we're going to kind of pick up with us bringing AP on, and then we start the medical questions and go from there. I just wanted to explain the lapse because I don't want you to think you missed something. When she dropped off that time, again, AP and I had a conversation, and then when she came back, that's where you and I are going to start right now. AP, are you there, sweetheart?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, AP.
Yeah, I can hear you.
AP, go for it.
Hi, so thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. I've never really gotten to speak to a medical professional in regards to these records because just as a CNA, I found them highly concerning. So it is good to speak with an RN. Basically, I can send over these records for you to examine as well to get your expert opinion. But one of the greatest questions that I have was, it was August 12th that my son was at Children's Lurie's Hospital, and there was a doctor by the name of Timothy Lutz. And Timothy Lutz released my son from Children's Lurie's Hospital and did not mention any of the swelling or abnormalities with his rectum. Now, he was sent to he was sent to Northwest Community on the 13th, and they said that his rectum had swelled to the size of an orange. Now, in your opinion, medically, is this something that could happen within a couple of hours?
Yes, it could with severe or a very large object that was inserted and I'm so sorry, Kara. Let me first and foremost say I am deeply, deeply sorry for your traumatic loss. I just can't even put into words how courageous you are. And I just have to say that first and foremost. Abuse cases were some of my hardest cases. I can't tell you how many times I drove home. I worked night shift my whole career. I'm disabled now. And the abuse cases were by far the hardest cases to take. So I commend you for being the voice for your beautiful son and for staying strong for your beautiful daughter. I had to say that first. I've just heard your story over the last couple of days and I'm so moved. And as I told Q, I'm here for you. I will stand by you. And you can, I gave Q my cell phone. You can call me offline any day, any time of the day. I will be here for you. I promise you. And I'm a girl of my word. So you have that first and foremost.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You are so welcome. You need allies, you need people to stand by you. And I'm happy to do that for you. Yes, it can happen with one very traumatic incident. If it was a large object and if it was inserted very harshly, usually we see prolapse rectums happen over a period of time. But since your son was just a toddler, it wouldn't take much for something that traumatic to happen.
Sure.
But the size of an orange, I mean, that is significant abuse.
Swelling. Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know your whole story. I do sadly know that he did pass. I don't know exactly what of. Did he pass?
Cervical spinal cord injury.
Okay. So most likely shaking.
Go on.
Shook or?
We don't know because unfortunately the body of my son was so mangled when he finally got to the forensic pathologist, and his organs weren't even included along with the neck organs and hyoid bone, which even my forensic pathologist said it rarely ever happens. They don't just take those organs and not send them along with the body to be examined.
Yeah,
so she didn't have exactly. So she didn't have anything really to work with. I mean, they didn't have tissues either for her to see. She couldn't even tell me what the deep tissue back bruising was from because she didn't have the tissues to tell that story. So it was all reliant upon the police, because her first medical opinion and her first concern was suffocation, because there was bruising, discoloration around his nose and his mouth. And that's what you see in suffocation. But because there's so little forensics in regards to suffocation, that relies solely on the investigation done by the prosecutor's office and the police department.
And why was it that his organs were not there? Who removed them? Was it the coroner that removed?
John Walsh, who no longer works at the Cook County Medical Examiner's office and was only a fellow. This was somebody in training for forensic pathology. This was not somebody who was certified in forensic pathology.
Okay.
So he didn't even have a certification.
Cook County has a horrible reputation. I lived in Chicago for a long time, but I wasn't a nurse at the time. I went back to school for nursing. But Cook County has a horrible reputation, which I'm sure you've probably heard of.
Extremely corrupt reputation.
It is. From top to bottom. I knew that even before I even got into the medical field. And sure. I'm not afraid to say that, and I'll stand by that. Okay, so you had the organs removed at Cook County, and then what did you then have your son then sent to a different or a private medical examiner? Is that
Yes, sent by a forensic pathologist. I will not mention her name.
No.
But yeah, he was sent to my independent pathologist, and
Okay.
almost a year later, she was
Wow.
allowed to examine the organs. And regarding the examination of his organs, she had to be supervised by someone there. They wouldn't even send them to her. They wouldn't let her look at them alone. She had to be supervised by somebody. And we don't
Was that
even
because
know.
I'm sorry, you're on a delay. I do apologize if I interrupt you. I really do. Is it
You're fine.
Was it because the case was under investigation? Is that why she needed to be supervised, or what was the reasoning there?
There was no reason ever given. We are not sure to this day why that was the reason. But in addition to that, they're trying to tell me that 3 vials of blood that they took from my son the day after he passed aren't enough to test whether there was any genetic disorder or any DNA issue. They wasn't enough testing. Yeah, exactly.
Did they test him for any drugs within a system or anything?
Yes, they did. I should have had an independent report done on that as well, because honestly, I do not trust that office at all. I mean,
I don't blame you.
Even the fact that they're being told there is a spinal cord injury, and they spoke directly with the pathologist, they know for a fact there is a spinal cord injury. I have this in writing in emails. They still won't change the cause of death.
What is it listed as now?
Natural unknown.
Natural, as a 2-year-old.
Yes.
That's unheard of. I'm not going to profess to be an expert in autopsies or medical examination. That my entire career was in trauma care, but I've never, and sadly, I've been at the bedside of many kids that have passed, and I can honestly say, in my 10+ year career, I never had a child pass of quote unquote natural causes.
Oh no, it makes absolutely no sense, especially with the history. The coroner actually told me, the medical examiner, I apologize, John Walsh, told me that my son's medical history didn't matter. I mean, you're going back and forth to 3 hospitals in a 2-week span. It was actually longer than that, because this problem started on the 2nd of August, went on until the 14th. Even after emergency rectal repair surgery, he was still having issues and hemorrhaging. So it went all the way up to October 17th. He passed away October 31st. You're telling me the medical history isn't important there?
So, I'm sorry, repeat that. When did he have the rectal surgery?
October 14th, emergency rectal repair surgery, because he was in critical condition.
Right, because it was so prolapsed. And he died in October?
October 31st.
And I'm speechless, because I'm just dumbfounded how they could not put 2 and 2 together. He most definitely, there had to have been a correlation between the two. Most likely, he ruptured, my guess. As a nurse, we can't diagnose, of course, that's a doctor's job. But it seems to me that a complication from that surgery and or additional trauma. Sorry, I'm stuttering over my words. I'm almost in tears myself. It's not even my child.
Yeah, it's sad.
It truly is. And I'm sorry, Kara. This was always the hardest cases for me to handle, and your courage is just unbelievable. Was there an incident that happened of abuse between the surgery and when he passed, do you believe?
I don't know.
Like another incident, possibly?
I was not around for 3 months, because I wasn't even allowed to see my kids unless I was willing to sign that I was a danger to my children and be supervised by a government supervisor for $900 a month.
Jesus.
I'm so sorry.
So I had no idea what was going on. I was told that everything had been fixed, that there were no problems, and that it was a one-time thing. I didn't know until I was finally given the medical records, and the way I got the medical records was because I got my medical rights back. So when I got my medical rights back, the first thing I did was request the medical records for my son,
And then I'm seeing that he's back and forth between 3 different hospitals that they were saying he had no anal tone at all.
Right.
So this is a 1-year-old at the time with absolutely no anal tone, no history of constipation. He never had to use enemas. He never had difficulty eating. He had no other health issues. And all of a sudden, all this happens within a couple months.
The only way I could imagine they could deem it natural causes if he was grossly premature or if he had some very obvious defect of his intestines at birth and had a poor outcome. We do see that in a very small percentage of, primarily.
Oh, yeah.
Primarily.
They tested him for all that, though. They tested him. They tested him.
You would have known that. You would have known that right away. And it sounds like you had a healthy birth and no problems to begin with. So you would have known all that. This would have been a gross abnormality from day one.
Yeah, the only thing he had was plagiocephaly.
Okay.
So basically, the head needed to have a helmet to get properly formed.
Yeah. I know that's a very common. That's the very common.
Oh, it's over 50% of kids, and it's even more prevalent in Polish children, actually, from what I learned. And both my daughter and my son have a lot of Polish genetics.
I can tell by your last name. I used to date a guy that was Polish, so.
I wasn't at all surprised by that, and it was fixed. There was no issue with that. But no, he had intestinal issues. Common. He had no stomach issues. He had no problems eating. I mean, he was completely healthy.
Yeah, and those are totally independent of each other. They have no relation to each other. The abnormality with his brain just not developing as fast in time. You know what I mean? That has no affect on his intestines and tone, and that's just heartbreaking. I suspect that there was possible following his surgery. I'm guessing that there was some type of complication and/or additional trauma that took place.
Well, in addition to the rectal repair surgery, they were doing sclerotherapy because the rectal repair surgery was not working. And from what I have researched, especially in young children, that can have spinal defects.
It can, yeah.
It's not likely, and it's very, unusual if that occurred. But it is a question of could that have happened as well? And why do you need sclerotherapy after you've had an emergency rectal repair surgery? The rectal repair surgery should have fixed the problem.
Right. Exactly.
But I do have another question for you. So when I was reading through the medical records, my ex's statement to the doctor was that my son had a very large bowel movement, and that was what caused the rectum to fall out. And no anal tone. So in your medical opinion, is that even possible?
Never. I should never say never. In the 10 plus years I was a nurse, I've never, ever heard of that. Unless for some ungodly reason that child swallowed something like a foreign object of sorts. And that, let's just say, it's not even feasible, but let's just say the small child swallowed a huge amount, like a Lego or something that could cause severe damage as it's going through the intestinal tract. Maybe I can see it in that regard, doing some kind of tearing, but an actual bowel movement itself, as long as the child did not take in anything orally that would create such trauma, no. I mean, unless he was like constipated for like a month, but he would die. He would have a bowel obstruction and his colon would rupture before it would. I've never, ever, ever heard of that. So
yeah, I when I read that, I was in disbelief. I was in disbelief that someone could be that stupid and think that was even plausible and tell that to a medical professional. I was also in disbelief that this was this Timothy Lutz that I was telling you about. So on October 17th, my son was taken to Timothy Lutz for an exam, which if my son wasn't having any more problems with his bowel, you wouldn't have gone to somebody October 17th
when everything was going on in August.
Right.
So he was taken to this specialist on October 17th, and the specialist was the surgeon who did the surgery and was the one who recommended the sclerotherapy and everything. And he literally states in his report that it could have been caused by all the processed food that I was feeding my son. First of all, I wasn't feeding my son processed food. He was having eggs, omelets, things of that nature, healthy foods, and very mixed diet. So I thought it was very odd that a professional of that caliber would even put that on paper after a child just had an emergency rectal repair surgery.
No, and those are very soft things that you would never imagine that could even bother such a child.
Exactly. And the fact that this individual was blaming me when they never even met me, and this was based upon what Tom had told him, I just found that so odd that you would be willing to write that as a professional medical opinion based on what an individual with no prior medical training, no knowledge of medicine told you.
You'd be surprised what ends up in medical notes, sadly. But no, I mean, that sounds ridiculous. I mean, if the child was consuming something outrageous, like, I mean, I can't even think of anything that would even make sense. But I mean, even processed foods aren't going to cause that much damage to the bowels that to cause a protrusion or even a complete prolapse. So that's.
I found that very strange.
Yeah. I mean, maybe if you were trying to feed a 3-month-old, a full adult diet, that might be a totally different animal. You know what I mean? But if you're trying to feed a toddler, I mean, by 1.5, 2-year-old, they're already eating almost everything. As long as you're cutting it up, they're eating almost everything we eat anyway. So that's far different than maybe a doctor trying to tell someone to not feed a 6-month-old, a steak and potatoes and, asparagus, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And, originally I thought that my son wasn't taken to a specialist. Originally, I thought that my ex had not taken him to a, what is the specialist for, like rectal colon issues?
Gastroenterologist.
So it was when he did take him to the gastroenterologist, it was the page like 400 of the medical records. There's a lot of medical records. So this is like page 400 where he's telling a doctor that he did take him to the gastroenterologist, and the gastroenterologist told him that my son had no anal tone at all.
Wow.
Yeah. And he never took him back. So I found that interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean, that alone is a form of neglect. I mean, he'd have to have some sort of follow-up, and at some point they would even consider, I would imagine, if his rectal tone was so poor, they may even would have to consider like a colostomy at some point, Yeah,
I was reading about that too, that there was 2 different types of rectal repair surgery, one where you would have a colostomy and one where they didn't. And I think it was one that went through the stomach, and there was one that went directly through the bowel.
Mm-hmm.
And he had the one that went directly through the bowel, so he wouldn't have to have the colostomy. And I'm wondering if the problem went past the bowel, like where there was issues with, the intestines in the stomach area, and they had to go through the stomach to fix the problem, and they didn't.
Very possible. And sometimes the problem can happen lower down or higher up, depending on how you're looking at it. And if they don't get it in the right location, sometimes they have to go back in and redo it, or, they can create then what's called an ileostomy, which just gets too complex. But you're a CNA, you said, so you have a very good understanding of that.
Well, yeah. And because I'm a CNA, I've had patients with prolapse. I've had a patient with uterine prolapse. I've had a patient with rectal prolapse. And these are elderly people.
We were talking about, I think when you had bounced off, we were talking about how it's very common for uterine prolapse when people decide not to get a hysterectomy. You see that quite often. But it's very uncommon to see. You see sometimes a prolapse rectum in geriatric patient possibly that had, maybe they've had irregular, maybe
Right.
diverticulitis or something, ongoing Crohn's disease or something that's lasted their whole life, and now they've gotten to a place where, but like I said, in the times that I could probably count on one hand that I had it in a pediatric patient, it was all due to abuse, or a very rare birth defect.
Mhm. Well, my clients who have had prolapse issues, I mean, none of them were ever dying from them.
No,
So that was the thing that really shocked me, was the fact that it says on my son's medical records that he was high risk for morbidity, mortality, and complications because of the incarcerated prolapsed rectum. Now, because the prolapsed rectum had become incarcerated, could that cause infection throughout the whole intestine?
Most definitely. And not only that, it can cause infection throughout the entire body, because once that intestine has now been exposed, it's grossly inflamed and therefore susceptible to, once you're in, imagine it like a balloon. Okay, so if you blow the balloon up as far as it can go, and then it becomes thinner and thinner, well, eventually that lining will tear. And if that tears, all the contents of your intestine will eventually go throughout your body, and then you'll become septic. I'm not sure if you ever had a septic patient, but that becomes life or death. And,
correct. Yes, I have had a septic patient.
Yeah, I'm sure.
AP, let me ask you a question right here on
Yes,
this
ma'am.
topic right here. So if that happened and baby James had passed away from the infection,
Yes, ma'am.
would that cause his
Spinal cord injury?
Well, I was actually looking at the petition, Kara, where when they found him, he was bleeding and foaming from his nose and mouth.
Yeah.
Most definitely. I have not read the petition, so I don't know. I would love to see it, and I'll definitely look into it, Kara, when we get off here in the next couple days. I'd be happy to read as much as I can.
Sure.
I haven't read it, so I can't speak to it, but sepsis can, in children, it happens much quicker, but sadly, one of the end results is fatality. And what happens is the infection travels from his little belly into the bloodstream, and then therefore the organs shut down. And to answer your question, Q, most definitely the foaming of the mouth is just yeah.
So the other question that I had, so yes, when my son was found, he was bleeding from his nose, mouth, and he was foaming. But on the medical records, it also stated that he was immunocompromised. What does that mean when it's stated on medical records?
It just means there's either a disease process or something, or a birth defect that has caused his immune system to be weakened in some sense. I would imagine it's his bowel disease which caused him to be immunocompromised, which just means something compromised his immune system. So,
because it didn't say on the medical records what it was. It never mentioned anything. It just said that he was immunocompromised. So I found that very odd.
It is. Like I said, I'm just guessing here. I would think it was due to his prolonged rectal disease, which therefore set him up to be immunocompromised, because it made his intestines are like your epicenter to your entire body's health. So if his rectum was exposed and being traumatized, it would therefore compromise his entire immune system, making him more susceptible to diseases and or viruses. Right. And his body the inability for his body to fight it off, because he already had a weakened state due to his rectal trauma.
And Kara, after that surgery, and based on everything that AP just said, is this the point where they sent him home and just told Thomas how to put the rectum back in?
No, that was
when this all started. Honestly, St. Alexius Hospital probably could have stopped all this from happening if they hadn't released him on August 5th. They released him when he was still prolapsing. You're not supposed to do that unless you've gone 24 hours without a prolapse.
What age was that, Kara?
Oh, same age. That was a week beforehand. That was so it started August 2nd. Okay. He was in the hospital for 3 to 4 days.
So he was 1 at that time, right, Kara?
Yeah, he was 1 at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, they should never have let him go home.
That was my opinion. I couldn't believe they released him. And honestly, I feel like they could have stopped all this because they could have figured out what happened, what caused the issue. They should have done their job instead of just releasing a sick child.
And was it ever reported at that time the cause of the prolapse? I mean,
no,
were you ever
they
told?
didn't know.
So what did they say that it was from?
They claimed he took a large poop, right? That was
that was what my ex had said. And but so they
discharge, do you know upon discharge did they say what it was caused by or what they suspected?
They suspected it could be constipation.
Wow.
But the fact that you kept having a rectum coming out,
right,
and he clearly didn't have anal tone, I don't know. You would still have to fix that,
right,
before releasing the child.
And to not happen till 1, it doesn't seem like it could be anything due to like a birth defect. Like I was saying, there are very rare circumstances that this can happen as a birth defect. You just don't have any anal tone, or there's some kind of motility.
And he never had that issue. Like upon birth, he was perfect.
He would have presented with that. I mean, they would have known that day 1, 2, 3 in the hospital. I mean,
they checked him for cancers. They checked him for cerebral palsy. They checked him for cystic fibrosis.
Right.
They checked him for everything. And when they did the sigmoidography, I think that's what you call it. They found no polyps. They found no evidence of straining or constipation prolonged at all. And he would have had evidence of prolonged straining or constipation if it became that severe that his whole rectum fell out.
Right. Absolutely. And they would have seen all the absence of tone in the sigmoidoscopy. They would have seen it then. I mean, they have to, that's primarily what that entire test is for, is to analyze the entire lower portion of the colon. So,
AP.
Yes, ma'am.
Would they have had any reason at all, with what you've heard so far, to remove and keep, help me out, Kara, his lungs and brains?
His neck organs, all of his neck organs, which include his thyroid bone and his brain and his heart.
Reason to keep, I don't think I understand the question. Reason to keep them, why?
They took them out and then they kept them. So I'm just trying to see, what did they need those for? Did that have anything to do with his rectum? Because that's the upper part of the body, not the lower. I'm just confused as to why they went there, or were they just stealing organs?
That's a great question. To me, no. I don't know too much about the cervical injury. It sounds to me like that's a totally independent from his rectum trauma. Those are two totally, unless he was, God forbid, in a horrific car crash, those two would never come hand in hand. One is totally independent of the other. The cervical injury sounds like, to me, like I said, I know very little of the case, and I have not seen an autopsy or the petition or anything, but it sounds like a cervical injury to me when I see child abuse comes from some type of blunt force trauma, sadly, or a shaken baby type syndrome, or being held down for a strangulation, or that type of injury. That has nothing to do with any type of rectal trauma. So the only reason I would think they would keep anything behind for a child with a rectal trauma would be a blood to check to see if he had some type of sepsis going on, which caused his demise, because those two can definitely be related, because a perforated rectum and or intestines can most certainly lead to sepsis, which is just infection in the blood, and that's very, very serious and can definitely cause death.
It would also cause a fever, right?
Oh, that's one of the
because my ex stated that he had a fever. Yeah, my ex stated that he had a fever when he had seen him before he passed. So that his head was very warm.
I bet most likely his, and like I said, I don't know, but it seems to me like his rectum, either the surgery failed or he had subsequent trauma after the surgery. And just imagine, his poor little intestines were already weakened and in recovery from the surgery. And if he had any more trauma, that would have maybe made that intestine break through even easier, make it more like paper-like than a balloon. And if it tore through, he could have easily become septic. Most definitely one of the first telltale signs of sepsis is a high fever.
So those organs they took would have told us that. So they kept them. It looks like you're saying, Hellraiser, they kept them to keep the story from getting out of what actually did happen.
It certainly sounds like they most definitely could have, yes.
And then they came up with this asinine story about the cervical. Is there any proof to that, Kara, in your mind, that something actually was wrong as far as the cervical part?
Well, that was my forensic pathologist. And, yeah, and so I definitely believe that that's accurate and true.
Okay. They just left that part out.
But one of the things that is in the report is that a cervical injury, what was it? I don't remember exactly what it stated, but they're trying to say that it could have been caused by infection, which was what his family was saying, not what my pathologist was saying. They was trying to say it could be caused by an infection. I find it interesting that his mother and him are bringing up infection. What infection are you discussing? Because now it seems to be like they may be talking about exactly what AP is talking about, which is this sepsis, and they knew about it.
Yeah. And that makes far more sense than a cervical trauma, unless he had, I mean, the two can run concurrently. I mean, he could be having rectal trauma and, God forbid, been shook too.
Right.
But one wouldn't cause the other. Like the rectal trauma doesn't have anything to do with your cervical spine. So to me, I'm a bit confused how anyone would have put those two together in any way.
I wonder if it could be. I've heard of stories where the one on top of my head is Zayla. Her grandmother chopped her up, you guys, after she was killed. Chopped her up, put her into a freezer, and she ended up having like a broken arm and a little bruising. And they believe that it happened sort of post-mortem, actually, from being put into the freezer and closed up. So maybe is this something they did afterwards to try to make it look like it was a cervical and take it away? Because keeping the organs and everything that they did shows the cover-up. So were they just trying to make it look like something it wasn't with the whole cervical thing?
Very possible.
Weird.
Very possible.
Because they don't go together.
Yeah. I've never heard of natural causes in a toddler. I mean, that just sounds ludicrous. Unless the only time I've ever heard natural causes in a toddler was when they were born with some horrible birth defect, and that they were given a very poor outcome, and the family would have known of this at birth.
Exactly.
That does happen, and usually, sadly, they die in the NICU, and that could happen a couple of days from birth. Or we've had babies in the NICU over a year and a half, so that does happen. But you would have known that, and then they maybe would have called that natural causes because the baby was sadly born with a chromosomal defect of sorts.
Right.
But never to a healthy baby like this.
My other question was, so on the child protection specialist report, now this is the child protection specialist expert at the Children's Lurie's Hospital. So the credentials are very high here. And this woman knows what she's talking about. Mm-hmm. Now, she wrote twice that there was consideration of anal penetrative sexual abuse. Now, in your opinion, because professionals are so afraid of being sued or taken to court. Is this something that she would have written down if she wasn't pretty sure this is what had happened?
Definitely not. Nobody, I can say with the utmost certainty, nobody writes those words lightly. We're very, not hesitant is not the right word, but we make sure that we're pretty dang sure trauma has taken place, whether it was physical or sexual abuse of some sort, before we write anything down or report anything. But we always err on the side of protecting the child. So if there's, like, for example, if a child comes in with a broken arm, but there's signs and symptoms that this maybe there's other bruising on the child in unusual spots, and the parent's affect is a little strange, you'll always see doctors and nurses err on the side of protecting the child. So we'll always assume that even if mom or dad says baby fell off the high chair and broke their arm, we'll always side on the chance that it could be child abuse. And usually they'll do a full body x-ray scan when they just x-ray a baby's arm, just to be certain. So for that woman to have put that in her notes and to back that up with her medical degree, I feel pretty certain that she was pretty sure that that's what took place.
Yeah, thank you so much, because I was thinking the same exact thing, because with hospitals under siege right now and all these professionals, being taken to court and the issues that have arose in that, I just did not think that someone would put that down unless they were more than 80% sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would say 98% of the people that are in the profession, especially in pediatrics, I work both pediatrics and adults, but especially the people that work in pediatrics, nurses and doctors, CNAs, we all err on the side of the patient, and that's the child, and we all want to protect the child. So those words were not written lightly by that doctor. So she had strong suspicion to write that. I don't know a doctor out there that's worried, that will put the fear of a lawsuit ahead of the safety of a child. I've never met a doctor like that.
Yeah. I also found it weird that they kept taking him to Northwest Community Hospital, and every single time they would take him to Northwest Community Hospital, he was transferred to Children's Lurie's.
Right.
So I feel like that alone shows they had concerns and suspicions, because they had Children's Lurie's doctors working in their hospital, and they still felt the need to send him all the way to Chicago.
Right.
And
well, he's got a complex medical history. I mean, it's not common for a toddler to come in with a prolapse rectum. And if he's got kind of an extensive history of that, they would want him at a children's specialty hospital.
Yeah.
Because then you want gastroenterologists and pediatric surgeons that deal with kids specifically, because it is a little bit different, an animal per se. So that's probably why he was transferred.
Okay, so why would my ex then keep bringing him to Northwest every time then, and not just take him straight to Children's Lurie's? Do you feel that's because he was getting bad looks, or he was starting to be concerned that if he kept bringing him into a specialty hospital like that they would start catching on?
Yes, that would be my guess. I worked at a 11 floor all children's specialty hospital, and yeah, I mean, everybody there. It's one thing to bring a child into any old ER and get maybe a side eye here and there, but if you bring a child into like a regular ER with a broken arm, most likely doctors there think, oh, little baby A has a broken arm. But if you brought little baby A into a children's hospital and a children's specific ER, everybody there is on point and knows all the signs and symptoms and has seen so many abuse cases that they would be looking at baby A thinking broken arm, but wait, she's been here. This is the 4th time she's been here this year with broken bones, and look at the affect of mom and or dad or caregiver and wait, look at the bruise. You know, they're just, I think your ex was probably cognizant of the fact that people were going to catch on, definitely. And they definitely look closer at a children's hospital.
Yeah, that was my thought process as well.
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
Most definitely.
I thought it was ridiculous. He kept bringing him to emergency rooms anyways, and not just the specialist, and had the specialist figure out what was going on and fix him right then and there.
Because he knew what was going on.
And the specialist would know, you know, baby James that much better than a random ER doctor. So probably didn't want to not do anything for the fear of, you know, not doing anything at all, but yet want to do the least resistant hospital, I guess you could say.
You ladies have both mentioned rectal tone a few times. Am I saying that right? Anal tone. Yes. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
So Leanne was wanting clarification on exactly what that is.
It's what's the easiest way? It's the strength of the muscle. Like your entire intestines is like it works through. We call it peristalsis. So it's the way your intestines kind of squeeze and release, and that's kind of how it squishes your fecal matter through. Well, tone is the way we measure the elasticity or the strength of your sphincter muscle, for lack of a better word, and that is the last part of your bottom where you push your stool out. If you have no rectal tone, it means it's totally laxed or relaxed and not working at all. You need kind of a squeezing ability. I mean, it sounds weird, but if you sit here, you can kind of clench your own rectum and it should squeeze together. Does that make sense? I hate to be crass.
It does. Well, let me be crass for you. It's how tight your butt is.
Exactly. Like the Kegel, you know, we do a Kegel, us women, you know,
yes.
It's the same kind of thing. So if you had no rectal tone, you would not be able to squeeze your bottom and to squeeze your rectum. You're just totally flaccid in that area. So when you have no rectal tone, you actually have no control over your bowel movement. So therefore, you may, maybe someone that's been in a car accident that has had some type of spinal cord injury, they lose complete rectal tone. So they have no control of bowel movements anymore. Therefore, they have to wear an adult brief.
Now that would be lower cervical, right?
Ma'am?
That would be lower cervical.
Well, cervical is like your neck, and then it's your thoracic is the middle of your back, and then lumbar is your lower back. So it would be a lumbar injury, which is kind of like your lower back, which would cause a problem with your rectal tone. However, if you have an injury to your cervical spine, it can infect your entire body. You know what I mean? The higher up, the worse the problems, because it kind of affects everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's very interesting, especially with everything in this case.
Yeah. So, if you, God forbid, if you're in a car accident and you injure your neck so severely that you're paralyzed, you lose the function of everything from that cervical point down. So if it's in your neck, you lose the ability to breathe, like Christopher Reeves. You lose the ability of all your intestines. So you lose the ability to urinate or defecate. You lose the ability, and then it kind of goes onward. But
gotcha.
That makes sense. Did the first autopsy say anything about the cervical, Kara? Remind me.
No.
Interesting.
And did they do a toxicology on him at all?
Yes.
And was it okay? Was there anything in his system?
There was supposedly nothing in his system.
Okay.
And cause of death was just natural.
I still can't get over that.
Unexplained, unknown. They said based upon the police report, they didn't have any reason to suspect foul play. So it's literally all this police station. Because if this police station would have done what they were supposed to do, this would have
definitely been a homicide.
Right.
Yes, definitely.
It was.
The fact
They
that
just
they're
didn't
trying to
classify
put
it
this
that
off
way.
as natural when there's so many pieces and so many issues that are
Yeah.
unexplainable is crazy to me.
And did Dad or Grandpa ever get in trouble for this?
No.
So they're still out walking around?
Free birds, as far as
If
I
you
know.
can't answer that, if you can't answer that, I completely understand.
Yeah, they're both walking around. Not only are they walking around, but I have to share custody with the father.
With your daughter still?
Yep.
That was actually going to be something I was going to bring up because Joyce was asking earlier if you had custody of her or if you were still fighting, and I wasn't clear on that.
Yeah, they literally threatened me. They told me that they were going to put me in jail for 6 months because I was speaking out online. They were using the gag order that Judge Dalton had put in place back in August when this was all going on and started, actually. And that I'd have no jury, I'd have no trial, and that I would not see my daughter. So it was either
a gag order for what?
for speaking
I know
online
it's
about what was going on.
I
They
mean,
didn't
yeah,
want anyone talking about it.
It's your
Right.
child.
that was my point. They didn't want anybody to. That's crazy. I'm sorry, Kara. Go on. Go on.
But yeah, they it was either jail, and I don't even know if they would have let me out, honestly. I mean, you're going to put me in jail up to 6 months with no jury, no trial. I'm sure you'd find absolutely any reason, given what I know, to keep me in there.
Right.
So I couldn't take that risk or that chance, and I couldn't take losing my daughter and having her end up like my son,
Right.
especially when she's still making disclosures about sexual abuse. I mean, it's ridiculous. You have a child who's been making disclosures about sexual abuse since she was 3 years old. She
That's
is now going to be 6. And you're still sitting here trying to say there's no abuse going on, especially after my son's medical records and history.
Crazy.
Are her visits supervised by her father?
No,
Wow.
That's
completely
insane.
unsupervised.
I'm just like, I don't get it. And now who runs that part? CPS?
No, that's all family court.
My God. Unbelievable. Was that the old judge's orders or the new judge or what? Because he's gone
The
now.
old judge, yeah. I had the 2 previous judges are no longer family court judges.
Damn, that has to be, oh my God, that can't be right. And then, okay, let me just to put this part in a nutshell. Grandpa and the investigation into him and his molestation, they dropped that?
Yeah, in fact, like I said, I learned today that none of those cases ever went to the state's attorney's office. Nothing regarding my daughter ever went to the state's attorney's office. Nothing regarding my son. Even when you have an expert stating she has concerns of anal penetrative sexual abuse, and that was before the rectum became incarcerated.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's the big, wow. What the hell? It doesn't, I can't even.
That's horrible.
Yeah. It's just insane. I mean, it never made it to the state's attorney's office. How do you have evidence like that and not take it to the state's attorney's office and try to bury it? And like, what is this police department got going on? I mean, this is the same police department that said there was no foul play before an autopsy was even completed on my son.
Jeez.
They put that out to all the media. Why
Yeah.
would you do that?
I didn't, as soon as I saw that, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, and that man, like, he's gone now from the Palatine Police Department. It was Commander Bratcher, and he's gone now. And you retire in your 40s as a police commander? Get out of here. After you just became a police commander and your father was the chief of police during the Browns chicken murders, you easily could have become a chief of police. Why would you retire?
Because he's still getting paid.
Right. It's one of the two. They either retire or they get a promotion after some weird shit goes on in these departments.
Or get some nice see you later package with a sweet deal every year. They get a nice little check every year, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you for being extremely corrupt, check.
Yeah.
How can it's like the whole damn city is in on it.
Sometimes
Well,
I think
it's like I said, there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, this would have been a major lawsuit.
still
I mean,
should be.
Yeah.
could
Hell
bankrupt
yeah.
the entire state.
Still should be, Kara.
And it may even, I mean, I hear malpractice after talking to AP.
Yeah.
On
mean-
St. Alexius, yes. On Children's Lorries, no, because Children's Lorries was actually trying to help. Regarding, except for the doctor, that Timothy Lutz individual, who I don't know what his issue was, but as a medical professional, to put something that insane about processed food, I mean, you've got to have a bias. So what is your bias? What is your connection? Like, are you a family member? Are you a friend of the family?
Does your ex have connections through that doctor or a lawyer or law enforcement or something?
I am not sure. That's something I could definitely dig into, because no one is a doctor is never supposed to be that biased, especially.
You won't be digging by yourself. Oh, we're going to do it. Yeah,
I mean, it definitely needs to be investigated.
You just follow the money, Kara. That's the biggest thing. You'd be surprised. I hate to say that. I would never want to say that.
It's
but
true.
There are just as many corrupt doctors as there are cops in every other profession out there. Follow the money.
Yeah. And they're full of shit, because when on your first podcast that I played in the video, I believe that's where we had the phone call of when you called this guy about the organs, and he just fumbled and mumbled. They don't give an explanation for anything. It's
he had no idea what he was talking about, because he was a trainee. He couldn't even tell me the company policies.
That sounds like some Kendrick Johnson stuff. I'm sure you know that case, Q.
Absolutely.
The organs.
Yeah. What a hot mess that,
Good Lord. Sorry to go off topic, Kara, but
no, you're fine. You've actually helped so much, because I've wanted to speak to an expert in this for a very long time, and to have everything that I already knew was improper to be clarified, especially the fact that you're saying like this happened because of a giant poop which had nothing in it. There was no obstruction. They looked in his stomach. There was nothing, there was no foreign object or anything inside of him.
Yeah.
So he didn't eat anything.
Yeah.
There was nothing abnormal about that. They couldn't find any polyps, like I said. There's no sort of evidence of any straining, of any prolonged constipation, because like this would have had to been going on for months if it was constipation.
Right. And you would have known. He would have been in incredible abdominal pain. You know what I mean? I mean, he would have been really, to the size of an orange at his size. I mean, that's like a fifth the size of him. I mean, that's horrible.
And the one thing I wanted to talk to you too about AP was they were giving him really heavy drugs. They were giving him fentanyl every time they had to put him down.
And that's going to slow his gut down.
And morphine. So why would you give a kid that if you think they're constipated? It doesn't match.
That slows your gut down significantly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they do use those drugs in the hospital. If he had surgery, they do use, narcotics, of course, even in young toddlers. However, if they did it long term or over a period of time, that's going to slow the gut even more. But they did it
for 2 weeks straight.
Wow.
Every time he went to the hospital, they had to put him under just to do the surgical procedure.
And that I can understand, because it's very painful.
Yeah. Well, there was so much swelling, they couldn't put it back inside. Yeah,
they could never have done that with him, totally conscious. So I can understand them having to put him under for that. Usually they use propofol. They usually don't use, really strong narcotics. They just use kind of like, the Michael Jackson kind of Twilight. They take them down where they don't remember it, but they try to limit the narcotics.
They were using every time it was morphine or fentanyl.
Was he at a children's hospital then?
This was St. Alexius. They did the procedure with morphine. When he was at Northwest Community, they were doing it with the fentanyl. And then I want to say at Children's Lorries, they were also using the fentanyl.
Fentanyl, yeah.
Yeah.
Fentanyl's not a bad medication. It has a horrible reputation out on the streets, but in the hospital setting, it can be very safe because it doesn't depress your respiratory system. So for kids, it's a much safer medication than, say, morphine or Dilaudid because it doesn't affect the breathing so much. So they do use it, and they can use it safely, but they shouldn't use it over a period of time because it slows your gut down, therefore making you, more susceptible to, additional GI problems. And he obviously didn't need any help in that regard.
And originally they did have him on a drug. When they first thought it was the constipation, they had him on something. I can't remember what it was, but it was
Reglan?
No, it wasn't that, but it was a specific drug for constipation. And then they actually took him off of it because he was worse on it. And that's when they did. Yeah, that sounds like it might be it.
Was it a liquid?
I don't remember. I just remembered reading that they took him off of it because they felt like there wasn't any issues with constipation or straining after all the sigmoid ones that they did. I mean, they did like 6 of those.
Oh, wow. God.
Yeah. So.
They did that many because he kept having the prolapsed rectum?
Yeah.
And not one person decided, hey, what's going on here? Instead of doing another sigmoidoscopy, let's figure out what's the cause.
I can't explain it either. It didn't make any sense to me. To
I'm
keep doing something like that over and over again on a child where clearly it's not going to change the results. I don't understand why they would do that.
I would think somebody's red flag would go off and say, why are we keep doing this when every time we go in, everything internally looks normal, but he's presenting with the same problem. What's causing it,
Right. Even at the emergency room, they should pick. Yeah.
Exactly. Especially at the emergency room because they see a lot of abuse that comes in,
I do know while this was going on, though, 8 mandated reporters had called in. So I'm convinced that some of those had to be nurses.
Yes, we have to. It's part of our job. So
how do you sweep all of this under the rug? That is a lumpy ass rug.
Yes, it is.
The only thing I can think of, Q, is that somebody knows somebody that follow the money.
Higher ups.
Yeah. It's a shade.
Only time. Yeah, that actually is their thing, isn't it?
It is. They specialize in that, I swear. And
how sick do you have to be to cover up something like this of a toddler? It's sick.
It is.
And do they think I was stupid? Do they think I just would accept, oh, yeah, you don't know what caused my kid's death. Okay, I'm moving on now. Nothing's going to blow up in your face.
Right. Yeah.
You'd be surprised how many parents. You'd be surprised on how many parents just take their word, whatever the doctor says, which is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That seemed to be what was upsetting them most. That was what was upsetting the judge, that I wouldn't accept his opinion or his word. That was what was upsetting the medical examiner, was that I wasn't accepting what he had to say either. I guess they just thought I would be a sheep. I wouldn't ask questions, but I'm full of questions.
There's a lot of superiority complex in those professions, sadly. They think they're godlike.
Oh, yeah. Some of them do have that disease.
I mean, even the detective I spoke to when this first happened, I didn't even accuse Tom of anything at this point. I did not say anything about Tom or his family. I was just asking what was going on. And the detective was just like, well, he seemed really sad when it happened, and his family seemed distraught. I'm just like, so what? You've never heard
families. I've seen plenty of. I've stood by cribs of children where the parents had visitation rights and they seemed very distraught. But then reading what they did to their child, you'd be dumbfounded. I mean,
the sadness, in my opinion, was for himself.
Yeah.
Because he was afraid of getting caught.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That happens. Yeah. You got to understand where that pain is coming from, because it doesn't always mean they're sad or hurt or sorry.
Because after his little show in the hospital, there hasn't been any emotion. There hasn't been any sympathy. There hasn't been any empathy on his part. It took almost a year to get a headstone.
Wow.
I mean, that's ridiculous. And his mother's excuse on my Facebook, because she decided to post this on my Facebook, was that they had other bills to pay. And I'm just like, every single bill can go to hell. Which, if it's my son's headstone.
And they wouldn't let you do it yourself or something, right?
They wouldn't let me. Yeah, I called All Saints Cemetery and I asked to pay for a headstone, and they said because he owned the plot that he had to approve, and he apparently didn't. So yeah, he told me almost a year later that he was going to do something because I brought it up to him that there was still nothing there. And he was like, oh, well, give me $500. And I did. I gave him $500. And finally, my son had a freaking headstone.
Oh.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, he could have, if that's what he wanted to do, he could have just let you go ahead and handle that a long time ago.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. It didn't make any sense. He wanted full control of everything, but yet you did absolutely nothing for your son after he passed. So it's like, why did you want the control then? That becomes the question.
Right. Did he get some insurance?
I have no idea. I don't know. That was something that a law firm had looked into, and apparently they didn't see anything or find anything. So probably not. I don't,
So I want to know. Situation. Say that again, Kara. I'm sorry.
It's just a frustrating situation all around.
Oh, I can only imagine. Oh my God, I would be a terror. I know that. Palatine would be sick and tired of hearing my name. Oh my God.
Oh, they're sick and tired of hearing my name. They can't believe this has gone on as long as it has. They thought that this would blow over and be done with, and now we're 2 years later and they're still getting phone calls. They're still being called by news stations. Politicians are even calling them that support me. They're having a lot of issues.
Good.
Because you know what, Kara? If you don't fight, everything that you're doing is going to save another child.
Right.
It's never in vain. Your beautiful son, I'm sure, is looking down, so proud of you. And I know your daughter is just incredibly proud to have you as a mom. And you're saving that next baby, Yeah. If you stay quiet and wallow in your own suffering, I'm sure that would be much easier if there isn't easier in the situation. But because of your strength, you're going to protect another child.
That is what I'm doing. That's the goal. I mean, right now I'm actually talking to a woman who's going through the same scenario where there was multiple DCFS involvement and family court involvement. She actually asked for an emergency order protection the day before her son passed and was denied. Oh. And they're doing basically the same thing, where they're trying to cover up her son's death. They haven't even arrested anyone. This is a 6-year-old boy. Oh. There is no reason you shouldn't have arrested someone. And he came into the hospital with head trauma the day before. Wow. And made a disclosure of abuse. Why the hell hasn't anyone been arrested?
That's always the question.
You'd be surprised. It's so hard to take away parents' rights. I mean, we would have kids that would come into the hospital, shaken baby or blunt force trauma, you name it, sexual abuse, and the parents would still have rights in the hospital. And let me tell you, it took every ounce of my being to not wrestle those family members away from that crib. I mean, it doesn't.
And that just tells you the failure of our court system. That's appalling. Because I didn't have rights. I am a CNA who didn't have rights of my children. I am a CNA who is allowed to be alone with my clients and is trusted with the care of my elderly clients who have dementia or paraplegic or you name it. I've pretty much had everything. But yet I can't have rights of my children, medical rights or educational rights. It just doesn't even make any sense. and you've never found me to be a danger to my kids. So how is it there are murderers walking around with medical rights and abusers walking around with medical rights, and I didn't have any?
I don't get it. And putting those babies in the house with some perverts on top of that.
Oh, God, yeah. Those are the worst. Jeez.
I don't understand.
Our system is a failure. Our system is an utter failure. And the more I hear about these children suffering, you know, just the more pain it makes me feel, because I had no idea that the court system was like this. I had no idea that the world was like this. I mean, if somebody would have told me my own story 5 years ago, I probably would have said, "Did you escape from a nut house?" You know, it's just so unbelievable. And if I didn't have all the documents proving every single thing that I'm stating, you know, it would just be unbelievable.
Yeah. But I hear that there are a lot of stories, that just get crazy. I don't know, not to pit one against the other, but just like you said, the system is failing big time.
So yeah, something needs to be done, because this cannot happen to any more kids. And I mean, my son was clearly tortured, and for a 1-year-old to go through something like that, I can't imagine what he was thinking or what he was feeling. And for my daughter to supposedly witness it and still recant it to this day, it just it hurts my heart.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm sure.
I cannot even imagine. I mean, wow. And then not to get justice on top of that, that's just not cool.
No.
Exactly. But thank you so much for your guys' time. I am going to have to get off now, but I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and speak with both of you. You're very powerful, wonderful ladies, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, and like I said earlier, your strength. I can't even find words for it. And I'm really sorry that you've had to go through all of this and fight this battle like this. I know you weren't completely alone, but I just, hope you find some comfort in knowing that there's new ears in this room that have heard what you said, and that can go on now and help tell James's story. They're going to sign that petition, and they're going to help you get justice. If nothing else, find some comfort in that. And we'll stay in touch. We're not even. And I said I got some digging to do about some of these culprits. So, are you still on vacation?
It's ending now. Everybody's asleep right now, but yeah, it's gonna be ending. I have to bring her back, unfortunately, tomorrow morning at 1 p.m. So tomorrow afternoon. So this is the last day. But it's been a blessing. It's been wonderful. And I'm very thankful for this time with my mother and, my daughter. And I'm just, glad she's sleeping in a bed safe. And I know where she is. And, because every single time she goes there, I never know if she's coming back. And as a mother, that's the hardest thing in the world, to send your child somewhere and not know if they're going to come back alive.
Oh, my God. Yes.
I can't imagine. Well, I know, at least, I can speak for myself and Q. I think you've got 2 more people in your corner now. And I meant what I said before. I am here for you day or night. Q has my number. I'll have her send it to you. You can call me day or night. I will do whatever I possibly can to answer any questions. I live afar from you, but I will do and answer anything I can to help you. I hope you find a little bit, go to bed tonight feeling a little bit better, that you have a few more people that are part of your army now.
Definitely. Thank you, ladies, so much.
You are so welcome. Your courage is extremely inspiring. It really is. And thanks to you and your courage to stand up for your beautiful baby boy. I pray that others will not suffer like he did. So, but please reach out. We are here for you.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. I will. Good night, guys.
Yeah, have a good night.
God bless.
God bless.
on the news. To see these kids missing just sickens my mood. Now I got an attitude. You think I won't battle fool? I will slap the fuck out of you. Maybe I am a radical. Charged up with a matador. If you don't love the kids, why do you got them for? Tell the truth, how they got out the door. These cases I can't ignore. You damn right I want your face on the floor. We lacking info pimping, I'ma need more. See, it's the truth that we want. You're supposed to love your kid, the truth is you don't. Somebody bring them parents up to the front. Them kids been missing for months. Damn right I'm mad, pimp, I done had enough. Oh, my business, bitch, I don't give a fuck. I might just tear this shit up. Now we got summer, we got horse, and we got orange. Like the parents, they don't care. I'm like, what the fuck you doing? All of the YouTubers pursuing. They do more than what you doing. Now how the fuck you gonna influence? Your reputation done been ruined. Why they taking these kids? So sick of this shit. Taking these kids, so sick of this shit, Remember that kid they left in the car? Sydney Dill, she had a bum for a father, and it was hot as Nevada. Just break the window, but he wouldn't even bother. He making kids, now that's really a problem. What about that fella Kawan? The lady picked him up was a mom. Now Kawan was a friend with a son. I can't believe what they done. They found his body in the sugar cane field. Now his parents gotta shed some real tears. This ain't how the fuck we supposed to live. If you got a kid, show them that you love them. Cause they leaving on the dub. Protect them, gotta keep them covered. Cause there's some evil motherfuckers plotting, waiting just to touch them. Don't you think this shit is nuts? They taking kids out by the dozen. It's so many living in your city limits. If you think that they offended, that mean you think this again. It only take a single minute. Evaluate the way you live. This was a blessing you was given. It's gonna hit you different if your child just end up missing. Why they taking these kids? So sick of this shit. Why they taking these kids? So sick of this shit. Why they taking these kids? I'm so sick of this shit. Why?
I brought my creativity to YouTube in May of 2021. And the slideshow that you've seen it highlights every case that I've touched, every story I've tried to tell and shine a light on. That is not me gloating. That is me saying, why the hell is the list so big? Now, all of that didn't happen in 2021. Those are just all the stories I shined my light on because they caught my attention. They moved my heart. But why do I have a year's worth of stories in only 7 months? And a to-do list a mile long. If only I had more months in the year. It's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking. I didn't set out to make a true crime channel, and I don't intend to become that. It's just that this channel is about things that I admire, things I represent, things that I wish that more people at least knew about. That was the whole and only concept. And in doing that, I guess even I've had to realize, and I knew I was true crime, but I guess I'm a lot more true crime than I realized. So it dominates the channel. But it's not the only thing you have seen or will see here. I won't say that. But you will see it, and a lot of it. And I don't share it for fun and entertainment. I don't. That might be what the fair use says, but I don't share it for entertainment purposes only. I don't want to get emotional. And this is not about me. It's about what this channel has made me truly realize. You know, the world is hurting. And people need help. So, of December, we're going to dry our eyes and we're going to use our voices. And I would like to share with you, reshare with you, as many of the stories as I can that I have shared during this year. I pray that in the coming year, these families will have justice and peace. And to help them find it, I only ask that you click that button that says share. If you care about these people, do what you can to help them. That's all I'm doing. So look out for it. All month long, every single day. We started with Echo Lloyd, and I don't know what the next will be. I'll pull from my playlist and I'll pull from my heart. One last shot at it in 2021. Maybe even get justice. Well, that's all I got. I'll see you in the comments and every day in December.